Resident Evil 8 has been announced, guys. Finally to the world, it's been revealed, that being a trailer that was shown recently. And I want to talk about that trailer first off, but then I want to talk about the top 5 things that we want in Resident Evil 8 Village. So let's get into it. Guys, I'm a big fan of Resident Evil. I've absolutely loved this franchise. I really got into it when Resident Evil, pretty much Resident Evil 5, I would say, is pretty much where I started with this franchise. And then, of course, I've kind of tried to keep up with it as much as possible. Didn't really like Resident Evil 6 that much. Then we got to Resident Evil 7. I absolutely loved Resident Evil 7. And so now I'm really looking forward to Resident Evil 8 because it seems to me that when I look back at the span of time of this franchise, feels like Resident Evil started as one thing, which was horror, like a real horror game, and then it kind of turned into an action horror game, and now it's kind of gone back to basically just the straight up, gritty horror game that a lot of us really, have absolutely loved over time. Now, Resident Evil 5, guys, was more action, it felt like, than horror, but I still I did enjoy that game quite a bit, even to this day. But Resident Evil 7 was one of the most terrifying video games I've ever played. I thought it was absolutely terrifying, guys. It was up there with like the Fear franchise, with the Dead Space games. It was a terrifying experience, and I loved that about Biohazard. So now that we're coming into Village, I mean, this is where it's starting to get kind of interesting, right? We don't know exactly what to expect here with this game, but now after watching the trailer, I gotta say, it's pretty unnerving, to say the least, and I like where they're going. The graphics, I mean, I was expecting them to be a little bit better graphics, but at the end of the day, it does look pretty good. I mean, overall, it looks good, and I'm not really looking for the greatest of graphics with something like Resident Evil. I'm looking for something that's going to be a terrifying experience, but a story that's going to be psychological, unnerving, and something at the end that's very mysterious. So with that, guys, the top 5 things that we want in Resident Evil 8 Village, let's get into it. So guys, number 1, they kind of insinuated that this was potentially going to be a direct continuation to Resident Evil 7. However, it's hard to say after, watching the trailer if it's definitely going to be a direct continuation or if we're talking something that's going to be a little bit, off the beaten path. Obviously, we went from Biohazard, which, by the way, Biohazard is such a sick name. Village, when I first heard Resident Evil 8 Village, I thought, that doesn't sound very good to me. I thought Biohazard sounds really cool. But after kind of watching the trailer a few times through, guys, I'm starting to accept the name Village. And it kind of gives you that like kind of unnerving feel because it's like, okay, this is all being based around this village, this one kind of area. So it's kind of similar to Biohazard where it was all based around one area as well. So I kind of like that concept. We'll have to kind of wait and see as time goes here. But I think that this needs to be a direct continuation of Resident Evil 7, in my opinion. I would love to see them build off of what they started with Resident Evil 7, Biohazard. I'd love to see a direct continuation of that, that storyline and see where it goes. I mean, this looks very interesting, to say the least, as far as like, what direction they're kind of going in. And I got to say, it looks dark, dreary, gritty, and it looks pretty terrifying as well. That leads me to number 2, guys. Having new characters, new environments, and new enemies is something that I think is going to be really important moving into Resident Evil 8. And I gotta say, watching the trailer, it looks like they're hitting on all of those things. New characters, new environments, and then, of course, new enemies. And those are the things that you want out of a Resident Evil game. You want things to be somewhat similar, right? You want the gameplay, the mechanics to stay the same and true to, Resident Evil as a whole. But at the end of the day, you also want there to be differences. And so I think, having new enemies, new, characters in general, and like those new environments is going to be really great. I can also touch on, it'd be interesting to have this a little bit more open. Whereas Resident Evil 7 was so, claustrophobic feeling, I think this one kind of, it kind of screams to me that this is going to be something where it's like a little bit more open. Not necessarily a full open world, but it looks like it might be a semi-open world, which I think is going to be very interesting, like being able to explore the village and such. That's going to be really interesting. Coming in at number 3 for me, guys, one of the biggest knocks I have on Biohazard was I thought it was so good as far as it being like this terrifying experience. They had DLC that came out, but they had no multiplayer modes or co-op modes, which was a real bummer to me. I think moving into this game, I really want to see some multiplayer modes and some co-op modes, because I think it would bring you back to continuing to play the game after you beat the main story. And so it'd give the content creators more things to talk about. It would give the streamers more stuff to be able to, stream about, right? Whether it's on multiplayer or co-op modes. And I think that after you beat the story, it brings you back. And doesn't Capcom want that to happen? Don't you think they want you to come back to the game over and over again, not just for DLC? So, in my opinion, if you want to see the growth of this franchise as a whole, you need to add some multiplayer modes and some co-op modes, even if those are a little bit cookie cutter. That being like, some team deathmatch, or something like a Dead by Daylight where it gets 1v3, or, something along those lines. Even like a horde mode where you're going up against waves and waves of enemies. Those things really help build communities around these games. So that's another thing that I would love to see. And then that brings me to number 4, guys. If you did add multiplayer modes and co-op modes, or even if you just kept it as a single, player story, having new customizable options, being able to customize your character, being able to customize, different weapons and just different things of those lines, I think are really, something that could be really awesome, in my opinion, in this game. Now, obviously, you don't want it to take away from the experience of the single player story. That's why I'm saying having customizable options in multiplayer and co-op would be absolutely huge for this franchise, and I think it would bring you back to the game over and over again. So having customizable options would be absolutely amazing, in my opinion. And coming at number 5, though, guys, is one of the biggest things that I want out of this game is for them to stay true to horror over action. So look, there's nothing wrong with having action. There's action in any type of horror movie, any type of horror game, but keep it more horror than action. And we see this time and time again in a lot of these types of games, guys, that being horror games. Think of Dead Space. You had the first 2 Dead Space games that did incredibly well based around what it was, a straight up horror game that had action elements to it. But then it got to Dead Space 3, and it prioritized action over horror. So it was an action game with horror elements. So what I'm getting at here is stay true to horror, which is what made Resident Evil 7 Biohazard so great and successful. Stick to that, but also keep their, have elements of action within it. And it looks exactly like they're going to be doing that. And so, guys, overall, I'm excited. I am extremely excited about this game. One other thing I wouldn't mind would be a free-to-play, model within Resident Evil 8 Village. I don't think that they're going to go the free-to-play route, because obviously Capcom wants to make sure that they're going to be making, $60 off of each copy. But I think even if you had like the multiplayer modes or something would become free-to-play, lots of people would at least try it out. And so a free-to-play model might not be a bad idea, but I don't think they're going to go that route. But let me know, guys, what are the top 5 things that you guys want to see in Resident Evil 8 Village? Let me know in the comment section below. And for more Resident Evil 8 content and videos, stay here with Zero TV.